Hey, what's up? What's up? Good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? First of all, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I did not plan to take off 2 solid months, but once I got into July and thought about things, I decided just to not do that episode the second half of July and take off all of July and August. So, we have not been together since June, and there's a ton to talk about. First thing is Conclave Houston, which kicked off my July right after July 4th. I flew down to Houston that weekend, Saturday. Was supposed to land first thing Saturday morning in Houston and golf at 12:30. Flight got delayed or I got bumped or whatever happened. I don't remember what happened. For some reason, I didn't get there till almost midnight. And so I missed my round of golf that day. And then I decided to do 4 rounds of golf in 3 days. So I golfed Sunday, Monday twice, and Tuesday in a tournament. Yeah. I'll say this. It would not be hyperbole to say I've never, ever sweat like that before in my life. I literally sweat so much that I created a skin burn from wiping it with a towel. That's how much I was sweating. I literally sweat my ass off, which is great because I was ripped like the first half of that week until I started eating down there. And then I realized that every portion is big. Like they shouldn't even do appetizers. Like just give me the entree and that's all I need. But I learned that after the first day. But I don't never, ever, 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 ever have to do that again. You know, you have bucket list things. You want to jump out of an airplane. You want to climb Mount Everest. You want to walk over and look into a volcano. You want to, I don't know, grab a cobra by the tail, something. Yeah. Eat the hottest pepper in the world. Yeah. This is like that. I don't ever need to golf in Houston in July in the heat ever again. Nope, don't need to do it. Check it off. Check it off. But one thing about this trip is, we kind of stereotype each other a little bit, right? You see me, you might think handsome, debonair, intelligent, 007, Ewings, David Ewings. But other people may see, nerd, cocky, whatever. Who knows? Big nose. I do have one. This happens on a golf course a lot, though. And so sometimes you go out, I golf single a bunch. I may golf with one other person a lot. And so you get paired with other 2 people or paired with 3 people. And just from observation, looking at them, stereotyping them, or just observing them on the first hole or two, you kind of get this notion like, oh, this is going to be one of those miserable rounds with somebody who shouldn't be golfing or just not that cool to even be around and not very great conversationalist, all that stuff. And so I met this guy my first day golfing, which was Sunday. Should have been Saturday, but it was Sunday. And threesome they paired me with, no showed. And threesome they paired him with, no showed behind me. So just said, hey, let's just golf together. And first observation, middle age, upper middle age, older guy, white guy. Didn't give me impression off his, first shot off the tee that he was going to be very good to golf with. Didn't really say much the first hole or so. And then something happened, third hole, where we just kind of started talking to each other and started talking about each other's stories and having beer, smoking cigars, and really just started playing good golf. And the stereotypes just got blown out the window. And like I said, oil salesman in Texas, surprise, surprise. But we wound up exchanging numbers, taking a great picture together. He was a pretty cool dude. And I told him, listen, I'd reach out to you if I ever came to Houston again, or if you come up to Northeast, reach out to me. We'll golf together and all that stuff. And it might just reach out to him generally, just to say, hey, what's up? But I had a great time golf with him, and then golf the next day twice. Don't recommend it. And then I golfed in my fraternities tournament on Tuesday. And then the business of the conclave started. And so still a great time with frat and sorrels and friends that were down there. Party and business. It was another conclave or big corporate, conference event where I presented in front of the entire body. I think it's my fifth or sixth time in a row, might be fourth or fifth time in a row, presenting at our conclave, or chairing a committee, really. So it's always exciting for me. One thing I'm not shy about is speaking publicly. And so I got a lot of compliments, and it's not just a toot my own horn, but there's a method to what I'm about to say. Um, got a lot of compliments after I was done about how poised and calm, jokes I told, story, way I communicated, and all these things. And just PSA, public service announcement for anybody who may have a fear of speaking publicly, or any type of hesitation with, taking charge or chairing a committee, putting yourself out there. Be yourself. The one thing or the way I approach speaking publicly, speeches I've given, mentoring I've done, presentations I've done, chairing committees, is regardless of the size of the body, I approach it as I'm speaking to my closest friends, the guys that I hang out with, the girls that I hang out with, the cousins and family that I hang around. You don't get nervous when you hang around them. You don't forget your words or lose focus or fear speaking to them. So why should I fear speaking to people, especially in a large crowd? I probably know 2% of that crowd personally. And so why should I worry about speaking in front of or making a mistake in front of them? Something interesting happened with my presentation, but it's no need to cover it here, nor would I anyway. But that's my advice for people who want to speak. Just treat it as if you're speaking to people you care about, people you love, friends, family, your crew, your girls, whatever. One cool thing about Conclave this time is I got to have a conversation with and talk to an astronaut, which I would say, who can say they did that except he's a frat brother and he was there and everybody got to talk to him for the most part. But some cool pictures and shaking hands and conversation and all that stuff with Victor Glover, who is going to be on the mission that goes to Mars. I believe it's next year. So I thought that was just kind of cool. But great time in Houston. A week and a day I spent there. I will say it was a little long. But like I said, I went there to kind of just unwind, relax, golf a little bit, and then start the business of the fraternity. So it was kind of cool. Next thing I did was, when I came back the next week, was my TO's birthday. She turned like 22. No, I'm just kidding. She's she's funny. But by the way, tulips in the summer, out of season. Her favorite flower is tulips. I desperately tried, and I had to fall back. Not necessarily fall back, because who doesn't like roses? But my idea is, so listen, just a little tidbit about me. When I plan something, I like for it to execute flawlessly. And one of my flaws, if you will, is that when I plan something and it doesn't go the way I wanted it to go or as planned, I tend to get a little annoyed, and that is something that can fluster me. True story, fun fact. But I made it work. I found a great florist. She did an amazing job with, the vision that I had and what I wanted to have done. And so gave my TO three bouquets of roses, one very big one and two smaller ones that had meaning, which I'll keep secret. And the other side of that was, we went to a happy hour, a nice rooftop spot that I found in the city. And I invited her line sister, who's her best friend. And I tried to get her other two best friend there. Didn't know either one from a can of paint, but I tried to get their information, reached out to one, couldn't find the other, and tried to get them to both surprise her, or all three of them to surprise her. And so it wound up being only one surprise her. But when I told her that I tried to get the other two, and couple that with everything that happened, I removed a thug from my TO. And she, as you can see, hopefully she's not mad at me for showing this, but the thug came out of her, and she cried. But it was good cries. And so we got to celebrate another year around the sun for my TO, and it was a great night, to say the least. Then lastly, vacations actually started. Now I know what you're saying. Didn't you go to Houston? Houston was kind of like golf and then a lot of work, and sessions and all that stuff. So in started August with the Bahamas, which was actually TO-cation. 2.0. 1.0 was last year. And so went to Bahamas with Nassau, Bahamas, with my TO to the Rio there. Nice little resort. It's a little older, you can tell, but it's a nice resort. Nice food, although we missed dinner a couple times. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I hadn't been in the Bahamas since early 2000s. And that was basically me getting off the plane, going to the Atlantis, because I think I won like the President's Award for the year for my division or department, whatever. And so that was one of the prizes. And so I happened to be there during NBA All-Star week. And so I spent the entire time either by the pool, by the bar, or just, looking at superstars everywhere. Like Oprah walked by with like 15 people as security. It was crazy. And so, my TO hadn't been there since she was on a cruise. And so it was a different experience for both of us. For me, it was kind of like going to Bahamas the first time because it was so long ago that I had gone to Bahamas. And then about 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, something like that, we went to Jamaica, to Montego Bay. Annual trip with one of my best friends and his family and some his friends. And so it was kind of cool. Some frat brothers mixed in, a couple Qs, but they okay. They're cool dudes. And so a great time, not great golf. I shot 99 both days. Wasn't great. But had a great time. And last time I went on this trip, and I only golfed for 2 days, had one full day, and I think I flew out the next day. This time, stayed for the entire week. Well, we stayed for the entire week. And so got to golf for 2 days, and then I think it was 3 days after that, or 4 days, 3 days after that, 3 full days after that before we flew back. So it was much more enjoyable. Got to relax. As you can see, very, very dark from the 2 trips between the Bahamas and Jamaica. I have a beautiful, nice, brown, glowing tan. I'll say so myself. But great times in the Bahamas and Jamaica in August. Definitely memorable moments. Next thing that's on my mind, while I was gone, Trump had some problems. He was indicted a little bit, and I'm gonna run through these really quick. And so this is the totality of his indictments right now. He's got state indictment on business fraud charges in New York, approximately $130,000 in hush money with the Stormy Daniels thing. You remember her, the porn star? Yeah. So that equates to 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Pretty serious stuff. Then there's the federal indictment on classified document charges in Florida. He took the documents from Florida. He thought about declassifying them, so they were declassified. That's how that works. That's 40 counts, including 32 counts of unlawful retention of national defense information. If you're keeping up, we're at 74 counts right now. Then there's the federal indictment for the 2020 election interference case, which is 4 counts, 3 conspiracy, defraud, obstruct, and against rights, and an obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. So if you're still keeping count, we're up to 81 now. No, we're 78 now. So 34 and 40 is 74, plus 4 is 78. And then Georgia went off. Georgia, through, and this is the indictment of 2020 election interference case in Fulton County, Georgia. Georgia went off for 13 more. So 13 counts, 3 are solicitation, 6 are conspiracy, and 3 false statements or writings. And, there's a RICO charge. Now, RICO is essentially the racketeering charge, right? It allows prosecutors, I'm going off the dome right now. It allows prosecutors to basically take a conspiracy or an enterprise or a group, and there's a classification of certain crimes that can fit into this RICO that allows prosecutors to say all of you can get charged with this because your enterprise is operating because of these things that you're doing, if that makes sense. And any lawyer, feel free to comment and say that's not exactly what it is, but yeah, just in case that's what it is. And so 7 states currently have RICO laws or statutes. Pennsylvania, which I didn't know this, Hawaii, Arizona, Florida, Rhode Island, Indiana, And the worst luck in the world Trump has, Georgia. Yeah, Georgia has a RICO law. Also, fun fact, 3 states have RICO laws that are pending, i.e. they're going through the legislative process or there's some form of that process that they're in. New Jersey, California, and Massachusetts. So if those 3 go through, there'll be 10 out of 50 states that will have RICO laws in them or statutes in them. Interesting stuff. And so 34 and 40, 74, 4 more is 78, plus 7 and 3 is 88, plus 13 is 101. 101 counts. Make sure I got that right. 34 and 40 is 74, plus 4 is 78, plus 13 is 91, plus 7 and 3 is 10. Oh, sorry, plus 7. Look, at my math is wrong. I'm counting the 7 and 3 from the RICO stats I gave you. So it's actually 74, 78, and 13. So 91. So it's actually 91 charges out of those 4 indictments. I want to go back to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and think about this. When Hillary Clinton was running, and there's a possibility she was going to be indicted for, I think, the server stuff, or email stuff, whatever it was. It was said that we shouldn't elect a president who is under indictment or has a possibility of being under indictment. It's just not a good look. It's just not something we want to do. Barack Obama, when he was running, we shouldn't elect a president who's a socialist. Because remember Joe the plumber, and, nothing, not to speak ill of the dead, because he actually passed away while we were on break too. So rest peacefully, Joe the plumber. I mean, you did nothing wrong to me. You just had a really 15 minutes of fame that was kind of shitty. That's all. But we said we shouldn't elect a socialist. And so here we have a presidential candidate with over 90 indictments or counts of charges against him, from business fraud to classified document stealing to election interference times 2. And yet, I saw a poll today that said if the election were held today, it was something like, I think, almost half the people. Well, let me step backwards. 8% were undecided. So that leaves 92. So it was 41 and 41. I believe what it was. No, that wouldn't work out too well. I think it was 46, 46. I remember that it didn't add up to 100. It was like 45, 45, and 8. But 45% would vote for Biden, 45% would vote for Trump, and 8% were undecided. So they're virtually tied. I just don't understand how Trump actually has so much support when we say we're for law and order, we say we're for police, we say we're for justice. If Hillary had that, or Barack had that, or even say Biden, for that matter, had that hanging over his head, would they be electable? Let's look at the other side. Mike Pence, he, literally Mr. Jesus, right? Mr. Christian conservative. If he had that hanging over his head, would people vote for him? I don't understand the appeal and this victimage that, just his supporters eat up. But I do understand it. Politics has become this hyperbole machine. What did I say a couple minutes ago about never, ever, ever in my life have I sweat that much? I have no idea if I've sweat that much before in my life, but it sounds good. It sounds believable. And all Trump and his supporters do is speak in hyperbole. No one has ever been prosecuted like this. No one has ever in life been investigated this much. No one ever in life has been mistreated this much. Or on the reverse side, Trump is the greatest president ever. He has done the most for black people ever. He has done the most for job creation ever. Literally, you just speak in hyperbole. You speak in absolutes, grandiose absolutes. And you say it enough times and people believe it. You make yourself a victim of justice enough times that people believe it. This has got to be a witch hunt. There is no way I did these things. Just keep saying it over and over again. Even though we all know you kind of did. And the thing that we go back and forth with is even his staunchest supporters who know what he did still don't care. Oh, he had the right to take those documents. So would they're classified. Wait. You're about law and order though, right? I mean, the law said it doesn't matter. It's a witch hunt. Wait, huh? What? Gee, but these are the debates I have sometimes too. You can't be for law and order. Only in certain situations. You know, the comply people, they should have complied people. And then say Trump is being targeted for things he actually did. Just saying. I feel like every couple months we kind of do this over and over again. Probably because every few months an indictment comes down. But still, every few months we do this over and over again. And we get back to the same thing. He actually did these things. His foundation actually stole money from kids. He actually can't run a foundation in the state of New York. He gave the money to Stormy Daniels. And it's like, oh, when it was the grab him by the pee, oh, it's locker room talk. Yeah, I'm sure he did say it, but you know, so many people around the country do it too. He could have did that. So easy to believe because it's so easy to dismiss. But he couldn't have did this because it's a witch hunt. Just very interesting stuff. Just saying. What's in My Head is brought to you in part by Digga Movers, your safe and swift moving company. An A+ rated one-stop shop licensed and insured moving company, providing local and long-distance services on the move. For more information, visit their website at www.diggamovers.com or call 1-888-77-DIGGAM. That's 1-888-773-4436. The last thing that's on my mind is transitions. And I got a little smirk on my face just because you'll see why in a second. So on Teocation, to Bahamas, after a couple failed attempts at dinner, let's just say she had problems, I had problems, so we couldn't go to dinner 2 nights in a row. We finally made a dinner the 3rd night. And I've talked about different areas of my life that make August difficult for me. Losing the man I called my second father last year. Losing my grandmother as my first loss in August. Marrying the wrong woman in August. And so August is not a very pleasant month for me. But I asked my TO if we can change how negative August has been in my life by starting the month off with our anniversary. I know I kick game. That's kind of nice, right? But after she melted a little bit, she won't admit to it. I think she melted just a little bit from my line and my charm. She said yes, and so yeah, I'm not single anymore. And so we actually met back in 2014. Believe it or not, 2 weeks after I met my ex. But we went our separate ways and reconnected back in 2019 as friends, and our friendship has grown tremendously ever since. As that friendship grew and my healing continued, because the key part there is my healing continued, through my divorce, through so many things that happened in my life, she's been a great friend, been there for me, supported me, cared for me. And through other situations that I was in. And she's just been and became a very, very important part of my life. And through my own resistance. And I say that because when you think about healing, it's not just, oh, I'm healed so I can be in a relationship now. It's being healed so that you can be good for a relationship, so that you can be ready for relationships, so you can be ready to receive care and love in a relationship. There's so many components to it. And this is just me speaking, being eternal and verbalizing it. For a long time, I wasn't ready. For whatever reason, it just, whether the divorce wasn't final, whether I just hadn't healed enough from it, for a while, and there are multiple people in my life who can tell you, for a while, just the bare mentioning of my ex triggered me. And so you got to get to the point where that's not a hindrance on not only your life, but on future possible relationships. And having that finality happen earlier this year went a long way to clearing that hurdle of, releasing that weight, that anchor, if you will. And making the decision that I did around that to release something also helped with that. And then time just passing on and me growing and getting the courage. It takes courage to trust. And not me trust her, but me trusting myself. Because remember, I may have said this on this podcast before. I'm confident I have, maybe once or twice. I'm intelligent as hell, except when it comes to women. And when you're faced with that reality of that deficiency, self-deficiency that I proclaim that I have, and what it led to with my prior relationship and everything that came from that, the pain that I went through, you lose trust in yourself. You got to build that trust back. It's not just making sure you're ready to be in a relationship, making sure your heart is healed, making sure you're mentally prepared. It's making sure you trust yourself enough to move forward with someone who feels like you should. Making sure you're ready, making sure you trust yourself enough to be ready, and making sure you're healed enough to be good for them. Because you don't want to, and this is me, I don't know how other people think. I don't want to go into a situation not healed and hurt somebody else. And now I'm not good either. Now she's not good. How does that make anybody better? And so, the path that we walk at times needs to endure some tough steps. It's funny because I've said this for years. There's a couple things I've said for years, but there's something I've said for years. I want to be my best friend. I want to feel what it feels like to sleep soundly next to someone. And it took me a while, like I said, to be healed enough and ready enough to step forward into this space. And I even said this multiple times to her. I sleep amazing next to her. Although, for some reason in Jamaica, I was getting a lot of sleep and just having some crazy dreams. Like I normally don't dream. I was like back to back every night having some crazy dreams. Could have been alcohol. Who knows? But I think part of that is because I do sleep next to my best friend. And, I wish that feeling for every single header out there. To be able to sleep at night soundly because the person you are in a relationship with, you are a partner with, the person you choose to grow with, and hopefully they choose you to grow with them, that you sleep soundly next to them. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm happy. Very, very happy. That's what's in my head. So in 1865, Jules Verne described rocketing to the moon in his novel From the Earth to the Moon. Around 1942, Isaac Asimov invented the 3 laws of robotics to prevent intelligent machines from harming humans, where we heard this before. In 1945, Arthur C. Clarke proposed a geostationary communication satellite hovering above the Earth. JFK stood before Congress May 25, 1961, and proposed that the U.S. should, quote, commit itself to achieving the goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. Fun fact for you, Gallup poll back then said that 58% of Americans were opposed to the idea, 1961. But in the last, say, decade plus, the Avengers, Star Wars, iRobot, Star Trek, unless you're like me and been watching Star Trek The Next Generation in the 90s, and more have exploded the popularity of sci-fi. Sci-Fi.com explains the popularity as being attributed to sci-fi offering a way to, quote, explore social and political issues in a safe, imaginary setting. Now, I personally like to think that sci-fi is more popular today because of that and because society gets younger by the average age. Society engages and embraces technology in ways that kind of, appeals to the younger audience and its future potential. Sci-fi taps into future possibilities. Now, I'm talking about sci-fi because I'm going to bring in my guest for this episode, Lee Schneider. And I apologize if I mispronounced that. Usually before I bring my guests in, before we get on the air, I ask pronunciation and I forgot. Chalk it up to me coming back from vacation. He is a science fiction novelist. He's an author of screenplays, teleplays, stage plays, short stories, and audio drama podcasts. He has been a writer, producer, and director for television networks and movie studios. He is the founder of Red Cup Agency, something we're going to talk about, an award-winning podcast production agency, and he is the artistic director of Future X, something else we're going to talk about, a platform for futurist projects. With that, Lee, welcome to Dave's Head. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Appreciate you joining. I know I gave a short intro for you, but as always, I like to have my guests introduce themselves. So if you could take a moment and tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Sure. Well, I have a long, tangled career in media. I started writing for television and actually plays a long time ago. I had plays off-Broadway in New York and off-Broadway. And, it's impossible to make a living doing that. And I got pulled into the television, film, documentary world, which I did for a long time, putting off writing novels for publication. I wrote novels kind of on the back burner, like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then would go into work for Good Morning America or Dateline NBC or Fox News, and then come home and try to do my edits. So I had these very long, crazy days trying to fit in writing. But I've been lucky enough now to kind of reconfigure my life a bit and have time for writing and have time for production by switching over mostly to podcasting, mostly audio and some video podcasting. And that has made a big difference. So I've written one novel called Surrender, which I published early in the year. And I'm working on the sequel now, which is extremely difficult. Writing a novel is about the most challenging thing I've ever done. And writing the sequel is probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. There was a talk show host named Fred Allen who said, why bother writing a novel when you can pick one up for a couple of bucks? And I kind of get it. It's a challenging thing to write something, envision a world. But some of the writers you mentioned, that's exactly what they did. And it was extremely useful in helping people see what the future could be. Like you mentioned Kennedy and the moonshot, a lot of why that happened was because of people like Walt Disney and Werner von Braun and people and Asimov and people who were able to imagine this for people, writers who imagined it for the public. And you were right, Kennedy at the time didn't have a lot of support for that, but it took science fiction and other kind of creative minds to push it ahead in the public mind. So that's kind of a rundown of where things are at with me right now.
Gotcha. And I can't believe in my intro there, I forgot Walt Disney, how influential he was on just the way things changed technology-wise, video recording-wise, even the personalities and toys people played with.
Right.
But I'm going to take a step back because I was trying to keep things in my head. So 5 o'clock in the morning, you're up writing a novel?
I used, when I worked, say, I'm thinking back, like when I worked for E or when I worked for local news, sometimes you could get a late shift. So I would I'd go to work at 4 p.m. and work till midnight. And then I would have some writing time in the morning. And way long ago, I used to work in kitchens in New York as a kind of a line cook. And that too, you could show up, like your call wasn't until 2 or 4 p.m, so I could do some writing. But when I started working for networks like Dateline NBC and stuff like that, like they expect you at your desk doing stuff at like 9 or 9:30. So if I had to get 1 or 2 segments of writing, like, I write in 25-minute segments, take a break for 5, write in another 25, take a break for 5. So I would say, well, can I get 2 segments in before I leave for work in the morning? And that would mean getting up, I'm terrible at getting up early, but getting up as early as possible and just letting it flow. And it kind of works, very
Mm-hmm.
early in the morning, your inhibitions are down and you just kind of write what you're feeling. And if you've planned it out a bit and have a rough idea of where you're going, there can be some really great stuff then, because it's like, well, I'm up, so I got to
Mm-hmm.
do something.
And maybe that's what I need to do. So the reason for my asking, I've been trying to start to write a book for a long time now. I've
Mm.
had episodes and guests on talking about novel writing and book writing, and I'm frequently up 5:30 in the morning just
Good.
because as soon as the sun touches my skin, I'm up. It's just a bird chirps too loud, I'm up, and I'm just wide awake up. So that's the whole rest of my day. I'm just up. But I never thought about just writing something or getting something done as far as that's concerned. So that's something for me to think about.
It definitely works because what you can do is there's a technique called morning pages where if even if you have something you're supposed to be writing and you can't do it or can't think of it or whatever, I just pick up a notebook, usually by hand works better, and just write, I can't think of anything to write today. I can't think of, and I tell myself I'm going to fill 4 pages. Well, what happens after the first page is you start writing something because if you
Can't do that all day.
you can't do that all day.
Yeah.
And sometimes, another trick I've used is to write a note to my mother about, I can't write this thing. This story's too hard. Let me tell you about it. And before you know it, you're starting to write because it's about, there's an old expression, first draft wine, second draft coffee. And the idea is that to be completely uninhibited or as uninhibited as possible on that first draft and just kind of write whatever, knowing that you're going to fix it. It's okay. It's just either write to an outline or don't write to an outline or just write the scene or whatever it is, knowing you're going to come back and stop the inner critic and stop all the noise. I often on Saturday mornings I write in bed. I have a rule that everybody has to leave the bedroom. Everyone, wife and kid are out, and I have a little desk-y thing that I can put in my lap, and I set up my iPad, and I write for 1 hour, something that I've thought about a little bit. So it's not completely like, whoa, what am I doing? But, and I find that sometimes that can be I can just do 600 words, 1,000 words, because I'm not, it's like I'm in bed, the sun, I just opened the shades. So that kind of removing the inhibitions and the judgments, that's how for me the first thing in the morning works. It does, I work, my average start time now is about 9:30, so I'm not like the early morning guy except on the weekend. I just try to start it at a pretty reasonable time, and definitely have a rule where if I start looking at email or I start responding to clients, if I know I don't get to the writing till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I'm not getting to it. I have to skip it that day.
That makes sense. It's kind of like me working out. If I don't get to my workouts before noontime, it's probably not going to happen that day.
Right. Exactly.
But we could actually end the show there. I got enough nuggets from that just from writing a novel. But let's talk about some other stuff. Let's talk about what I talked about before I introduced you, which is sci-fi. Do you agree that sci-fi has exploded in popularity? And if so, why do you think it has?
Oh, definitely has. People have discovered it because of the Netflix series and Foundation and everything from movies like Her and, but you could name a lot of Philip K. Dick novels that have been adapted. And I think the reason is there's a two-part reason. One is anxiety about the future, and people want to know what's going on. There was an explosion in sci-fi in when Sputnik went up, the Russian satellite, and everybody was worried that that was a militarized use of space. And all the sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi started getting written about death from the sky, UFOs, aliens, and it was this metaphorical thing because everyone was either consciously or unconsciously worried about this satellite that was over our heads. And it did definitely drive the whole space program on the American side. So I think there's something like that happening now, where there's anxiety about what's going to happen to the Earth with the climate emergency, how, have we made some mistakes? Have we overbuilt our cities? Have we too many cars? Have we not planned very well for the future as a people? And whether people are putting that together in those words or not, I think the desire to imagine a different future, whether good or bad, is pretty powerful. So I think that that's driving a lot of the science fiction thinking that's happening now.
Yeah, I saw a graphic the other day that kind of went through the timelines of movies and where we would be if this was the time period. And I think Terminator was coming up not too long from now,
Right.
with AI and I forget the name of the AI for Terminator, but becoming aware of itself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what's
Terminator
your?
worked. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Terminator definitely worked for that. And also Blade
Mm-hmm.
Runner was, I think,
Mm-hmm.
1990 or 92. Blade Runner
Yeah.
was a little ahead, but Terminator seems to be right on target.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite sci-fi franchise?
Well, I do really like Terminator. I mean, I
Mm.
think there's just something about it that takes the horror movie and turns it into something that is a lot deeper than the average scary movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the privilege of a few years ago, I was doing a documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger and got to interview Geraldine Hurd, who was the producer on it. And at the time, she was married to James Cameron and the director of that. And just their thinking and how they figured it out is admirable to me because time travel usually in a movie gets very messed up.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no way to do it because you get caught in these logic loops. But the
Mm-hmm.
Terminator kind of did it. It's the only movie I can think of that I believe in the whole, someone coming from the future kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Avengers, they tried to do it as well, in the
Yeah,
last couple, and they even had some funny lines trying to explain how it worked. But yeah,
yeah.
it's time travel is touchy. So there's I'm trying to think. I think it's actually called the Time Machine, um, where the professor, goes from the
Yeah.
past. He bumps his head, hits the hammer, and goes way forward in the future and all that. But yeah, I like. So I'm a big Star Trek: The Next Generation guy. This is something I grew up on in the 90s. It was when Star Trek was coming on, Next Generation was coming on, I think Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. It was
Mm.
kind of one of those things. My dad and I would sit around and watch right after Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. Um, so that's still probably my number one
Uh,
sci-fi franchise, the
uh,
Star Trek series.
yeah, sure. It's remarkable. The whole Star Trek thing is remarkable because it's essentially utopian, not dystopian. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
scary things that happen and a lot of bad guys and a lot of destruction. But the basic push of that series is we're going to work it out. People can get
Mm-hmm.
together and people can work together and we will conserve humanity. We're not going to end this thing that we've got. And that's always impressed me about the whole Star Trek idea in the
Mm-hmm.
big, big, big picture of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna show how much of a Trekkie I am. In Star Trek: First Contact, the movie where they go back in time because the Borg are trying to go back in time to basically destroy the first idea of warp technology being
Mm.
created by can't think of his name in the movie, but one of the things going back and interacting with the people of that time, accidentally, of course. They talk about how we don't have money anymore, we don't fight wars anymore, we have a higher sense of being now.
Mm.
And this is I'm pretty sure it's like 2300 something like that. Because that's on that graphic as well. Star Trek is coming up not too far in the future, a couple hundred
Right.
years. But yeah, to speak to that, how Star Trek was always trying to give us a sense that in the future we figure this thing out from a
Yeah.
humanity perspective. So shifting a little bit, and you touched on climate change. So some people believe that climate change is real, some people don't. I believe personally in the science of it. Can we make progress to heal the planet, quote unquote, heal the planet with small individual action? Excuse me. Or will it take public protest demanding systematic change, or will it take some catastrophic event? I mean, we see some of the different climate events that are happening recently. I was in Houston, Texas a month
Mm.
ago that I talked about in my opening segment, and I baked for a week and a half. For some reason, I decided to golf 4 times in 3 days. in that Houston heat. But
Wow.
that's. I remember when I was down there, part of Waco, Texas, they said hadn't gotten rain in almost a year.
Hmm.
So what will it take? How do we make progress on
Yeah.
this?
This is something I think about a lot, and it's rolling this into the second book that I'm writing. The first book, Surrender, basically sets the stage for how we got ourselves into a climate emergency. And the second
Mm-hmm.
book is the people trying to work it out. And what I think about a lot is you have there's a real spectrum of reactions. One is I should recycle, the most basic things. I should try to conserve energy. All the way up to there's a great book, inflammatory title. It's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. And it's by this Swedish activist, Malmo is his name, and it talks about how all social change happened because there was, for example, he brings up this example, there was a Martin Luther King and there was a Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is, even though they started to merge in their thinking of what social progress should be, the powers that be were afraid of Malcolm X, and they started to see Dr. King as a possible alternative. The argument there is there's a leading edge of people who actually push things forward, but they may not be acceptable to everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm seeing a lot. You can have crazy climate activists who glue themselves to paintings. And I don't think that's really working. I don't think that the totally, out there people. I think that it's going to take systemic change. And that means thinking about how we remake cities. How do we do cities?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do cars? How do we do economic inequality? There are a lot of neighborhoods where they're non-white neighborhoods where they're dumping grounds for toxic waste, and it's been that way for a long time. Or they're manufacturing hubs, and there's a lot of manufacturing garbage and waste that messes up those neighborhoods for a long time, for years and years. So it's kind of that deep thinking, but most people, when they start to hear that, they kind of back away like, oh, that's really big. So
Yeah.
that's my argument for, there's a great book called One Green Thing, and there's another great book called Stop Saving the Planet. And these are both give you small things that you can do every day that might help you think down that road. Because to come back to your original question, it's really going to take all those things. It's going to take people marching in the street, probably. And it's going to take people doing small things, probably. But how can we get people thinking that, if we lose this thing, if we blow this, it's not going to be really hot in Houston. You're not going to be able to go outside.
Yeah.
When in California, when we've had smoke issues from fires, you can't go outside. It's kind of a shock, sunny California, blah, blah, blah. You can't go for a run. You can't go outside. You got to wear a mask at best, or even that's not possible. And that's going to be a shocker to people when they realize when that really, it's so, the rains are so heavy that Vermont is flooding out. Vermont is, Houston, Vermont, all these places are flooding out. So I think it's going to take everything that you mentioned, really. But on the everyday level, yeah, how could you fly less? How could you drive less? If you can manage an electric car, go for it. All of those things. And then I think we will be the people supporting the people who are more out there with it. Like, I'll probably never support someone who glues themselves to a painting, in the Louvre
Yeah.
or something. But I probably would support someone who's a little outside of where my comfort zone is, knowing that, my kids are going to be able to have air that they can breathe, or we're
Yeah.
not going to flood out here. So it's kind of a complicated scenario, but I think all of those actions apply.
Yeah. And how do we combat? So speaking of electric cars, windmills, solar electricity, how do we combat the counter argument to those things? Well, it takes manufacturing to make those things. It takes factories, and it creates pollution to make those things. How do we combat that argument for the better good of the result?
Yeah, that's a great question. And It's always going to take something, meaning,
Mm-hmm.
we've become an industrialized technological people. This is what we do. We kind of take over
Mm-hmm.
planets, not always to the best result. So it's not
Yeah.
like everyone's going to back out of that and say, whoa, we're just going to have butter churns. It's not
Hmm.
happening. People are
Yeah.
going to need technology. But if you look at fossil fuel creation and you look at wind power or solar power, it's a lot less damaging. It's always going to
Mm-hmm.
be some damage. When we recently got a plug-in hybrid car after a 2 year struggle to find one, which is a story I'll tell if you want. But it took 2 years to find a car that they had in stock that we could buy, and to
Mm-hmm.
charge that thing is not really super easy. Got to find a charging station. You
Yeah.
pay for it here in California. You pay a couple of bucks to charge it, and it does that uses energy to charge that car,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot less damaging. It's putting a lot less carbon into the air and everything like that. I mean, even having a car, it would be better to have a bike. It'd be better
Mm-hmm.
to ride around on a bike all over the place, but it's not practical for most people, and
Yeah.
especially where we live. So again, I think it comes down to thinking about the earth. If we can have a positive view of the earth, like this is a fragile thing. You can't dump stuff in the water. You can't send out plumes of waste into the air. The earth doesn't like that. And if people can
Mm-hmm.
start to see that and say, we have to take care of this place because the planet's going to be fine. When people talk about
Mm-hmm.
save the planet, I have a smile. Like there'll be a big rock in
Yeah.
the sky. It's going to be here. It just won't have any people on it, or people
Yeah.
who have adapted to some pretty rough conditions. So I'm not too worried about the planet as a big rock in the sky, but I'm definitely worried about us surviving on this
Mm-hmm.
planet.
Being able to live on the planet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. So there's a term eco anxiety. Um, can you define what that is and why it's a good thing or a bad thing that we need to do something about?
Yeah, I like the way you phrase that because it is kind of a good thing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety, we all talk about, or people will talk about, I want a stress free life, I want anxiety free life. But actually,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and stress are good signals. They help
Mm-hmm.
guide you. When say you're a runner or you're working out, pain is a very good teacher. When you go too far, your body puts you in pain. And then
Mm-hmm.
wait, I can't lift that much or I can't run that far. I got to redo this. And the earth
Mm-hmm.
is now giving us anxiety and pain. Uh, I think it's people feeling out of control. I would define it like that. Uh, uh, some people feeling hopeless, especially younger people, thinking that the older generations have just blown it for us, and other people like me feeling like, what can I do? I can't breathe this air. It's super hot outside, or it's raining so much that the garage is going to flood and our cars are going to float away, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that kind of thing. So I think it's that out of control feeling, and I think that it's useful because it might start us thinking about, well, we're not going to control nature. Nature does what she does, but we could
Mm-hmm.
control how we behave in nature and what we do in nature. And I think
Yeah.
there's a lesson there that people could start to get into that.
Okay. So we touched on Terminator a little bit, and it just finally popped in my head. Skynet is the name of the AI
Yes.
that becomes self-aware. Um, so on that note, what are your thoughts on how AI is going to impact us in the future?
Well, we're pretty much screwed as a business as usual situation because
Yeah.
already a lot of people are losing their jobs. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
People who write blah, blah, blah marketing copy or real estate copy, people who write blah, blah, blah sports
Mm-hmm.
results, people who do illustrations that are just kind of run of the mill illustrations, those people are in big trouble because
Yeah.
AI isn't really good enough to replace the really creative people. And I don't think it ever will be, but it's certainly
Mm-hmm.
good enough to replace the kind of, I'll write you some marketing copy. I'll write you some copy for your
Yeah.
website. I'll write you your podcast intro.
Mm-hmm.
There are AIs that will write the intro to this show and write all the social media posts for this show. I'm not saying they're
Mm-hmm.
great, but they work. So I
Yeah.
think that there's a real problem, and the problem is not so much who will it replace. The problem is it's a capital and labor problem. So forgive me for going all Marxist Karl Marx on you for a minute, but capitalists, like the people who hire labor, they see AI as a great way to replace a ton of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to replace people, that would write, say, TV shows. The Writers Guild has a huge strike going on now, and part of it is they don't want to be replaced by bad AI script writers.
Mm-hmm.
And the capitalist group, meaning Netflix and the studios, it looks pretty good to them to sit around in the meeting and say, "Hey, Alexa, write me a story about a romance, and they meet in Italy, and
Mm-hmm.
the girl's father died, and she's all sad, and she meets a guy, and okay, that looks good to
Mm-hmm.
Netflix and Disney and all those places, but it's not so good for actual good content."
Yeah.
And a real writer could do much better with that. But the plan right now is to do that. I'm joking about Alexa, but get a chatbot to write that, and then. Sorry, one sec. Gotta stop. Siri decided to jump in here. Okay.
AI is
So
taking over.
AI is taking over. So the idea is for Netflix or Disney to get a rough draft of that through just getting a chatbot to do it, and then hiring a
Mm.
writer maybe for 1 or 2 days,
Yeah.
hiring that woman or man and to fix it up, and it'll be good enough. Which of course is a disaster for good movies and good TV, but
Yeah.
it looks good from a content level.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the
Yeah, and I
short
don't
answer
know
is
how
we're in
much.
trouble.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know how much it costs for a writer for a movie or a copywriter for some podcast or some TV show or news network writers. But yeah, if you can get 90% of the work done just by clicking a button, and somebody comes in and does 10% of the work to finish it off, I mean that's number one. It's a great profit engine. Um, but yeah, it put a lot of people out of work.
Yeah, and it
Um,
won't, and it's not going to mean that it's going to be so much better. Like
mm-hmm.
there's, some people have theorized that there's going to be two tiers of Netflix, maybe more. One will be the advertiser-supported, garbagey AI-written shows
Yeah.
for people who watch. They don't really watch. It's just kind of on, and then you'll pay
Mm-hmm.
more for human-created shows.
Hmm.
Which is a fairly bizarre idea, but I could see that happening.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, like a human AI tiered system.
Yeah.
The other side of that too, that somebody in technology, code writing. And so
Yes.
using AI to develop code, whether it be games, applications, software, firewall rules, even if you get into armaments and military, to do a lot of that stuff. And so that gets a little dangerous. You have multi millions of dollars passing through systems every single day, personal information passing through these systems every single day. Click of a button, a missile goes here, or a ship goes there every single day, and to channel in Terminator, you get the wrong code in there, and suddenly you've got things going haywire just as fast. So
Totally
there's
agree.
definitely dangers in that.
Definitely. Totally agree. And also bad actors, people who
Mm,
hack those systems.
yeah, and if I like to think everything has a tendency or trends, or has tells if you like poker
Hmm.
terminology. Um, Not that AI necessarily would have one, but if you get someone who can figure out close enough range to a tell or a tendency, and to use that, like you said, a bad actor, that's a horrible concept to think of if you have AI everywhere.
Yep.
So it's there's got to be safeguards in place, but how do you know what safeguard to put up for this unexplored area of technology? I mean, this is
Well,
very
yeah.
infantile in its stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're way behind. When you ask,
Mm-hmm.
when you watch a senator or congressperson asking questions about computers, it's like,
Yeah,
it's really sad. But I'll give you
yeah,
an example of something that needs guardrails right now is banks are starting to ask for your voice so you can
mm,
okay things. Like you can get on with a chatbot and okay it the transaction with your voice, to which I said, no way, no way am I doing that. And there have been a few scams run where people capture enough of the voice and then get on with your broker or your banker and say, yes, I'd like to, it's your voice talking, but it's not you. I'd like to, make a deposit to so-and-so's account. And it hasn't worked so far, but it could work. And people are certainly going to try that kind of thing.
Yeah, if you think about the hang-up calls where somebody calls you, they don't say anything, you say hello, 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 or they may say, is this so-and-so? And it's a really recorded voice, but they know your name, and so they get you to say yes. So now they've got you saying hello and yes, and it's a small snippet of your vocabulary and dialect and all that, but it's a good amount of information to go on.
Yep.
But okay, so let's talk about Red Cup Agency.
Sure.
Award-winning podcast production agency. Of course, I have a podcast we're on right now. Dave's had podcast. And by the way, let me take a step back. For the record, I do not use Chat GPG to do any of my writing for this show. This is all my brain and mind and all that stuff. All the questions that I ask all come from me. Just want to put that out there. But talk about why your agency was founded and what it does.
Sure. I have a long career in TV. So I produced segments for Dateline NBC, and I did lots of stuff for the documentary networks like Learning Channel, Food Network, Discovery. I traveled all over the world, have been in nuclear submarines, have been at the top of buildings that they were going to explode. I had great adventures. It was a lot of fun. But around 2009, I felt I was kind of repeating myself. And I said, what's in it for me if I produce one more documentary, And the documentaries were getting a little silly, especially for the History Channel. They got very UFO oriented. And in the beginning, they were kind of fun, to do recreations of UFO stuff and ask UFO questions of people. But they sent me to the Nobel Prize winning inventor of the laser. And I had to ask that Nobel laureate, seriously, do you think aliens gave you the laser technology? And I had to keep a straight face asking that question. And he just laughed, which is what we used in the show. But after that, I started thinking, is this just getting too silly? So a show came up called Breaking Point, which was about breaking things, like crashing cars and breaking carabiners that you mountain climb with. And I thought, okay, this is a great show to go out on, The Breaking Point. So I did that show, and then I just stopped producing TV, and I actually went to a consultant, Pivotal Labs, and I said, what should I do next? And they said, well, you should be producing this podcast. This is 2009, 2010. And I said, that's interesting. I have all the gear. I have microphones and stuff. So I just literally started in my spare bedroom doing a podcast just to try it out. And decided it was a good thing because podcasting, we're doing it right now, you can connect with a lot of people. You can cover a lot of topics. The production stuff won't get you crazy. You can do good stuff without getting yourself nuts and spending too much money. And the conversations can be great. So I just started doing it, building up people, and eventually people started coming to me. I've done mostly conversational type podcasts, kind of like this, and a few storytelling podcasts where we get into telling about the first space flight or commercial space flight or, even chat bots and things like that. And so it's been just a lot of fun to do. And I did a lot of studio work to start it. And then during the pandemic, we went all to this pretty much. And I'm still doing we're on Riverside right now, but I do a lot of stuff where you set people up in a home studio and, we do the show there, and we've become pretty expert at cutting out the sound of the leaf blower and the dog and things like that. So it's been a great ride. I really have enjoyed it, and I like audio, and I like this kind of storytelling. I like conversations.
Gotcha. And I will say, too, for the record, I do all my post editing as well. It's not chat that does that as well, or any AI. Just want to put that out there. But no, so decided to go from TV producing to podcast producing. Have you done any TV producing since, or is it just been strictly podcasting since you made that switch?
Just podcasting. Now, I am getting more and more calls for video
Mm,
podcasts or video promos. So I'm
mm,
actually working out ways to capture some of the video and then turn that into an Instagram post that has video and titles and stuff. And some people are
mm,
starting to ask for more. Well, it's hard because, what's interesting in a podcast is two people talking. When you put this up in video, as long as people like looking at us, it's okay. But
mm,
if you want the background to change or if you want to cut away to different things, it starts getting into what I used to do, which is TV production. And
mm,
that costs money and it needs time and it needs
mm,
uh, equipment, really, good, better equipment than we might be using right now. So I'm edging my way into it slowly because I don't want to repeat what I've already done, and I don't
mm.
certainly don't want to do what I've done worse than the way I used to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at actually doing more AR VR kind of things, finding
Mm,
ways to, we'd be talking in this conversation, and then the listener would be able to, on their phone, see the Kennedy speech or see a walk around of Sputnik. When we talked about it, there'd be a thing, a blip that would come up, and you'd be able to have a look at that.
mm,
So that's pioneering stuff, and I don't want to do it with headsets because I find that we're not ready for that, and that I don't like the idea of being cut away from people.
yeah.
But I do like the idea of an AR or some other enhanced way. If we're talking about something, we could also see it, but it wouldn't pull us out of
Mm.
the conversation, and we'd still have the audio narrative to root us to. I think that's really important.
I think I know the answer to this, but my next question was going to be about Future X. Is that kind of tying into Future X? And if so, can you explain what Future X is?
FutureX is my experimental platform to just try things out. To in the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek-esque tradition, can we tell utopian stories and positive stories about the future, and give people a way of looking at the future which shows us a way forward? And it originally started with a wonderful friend of mine, Ever Gonzalez, who's an event producer. And we were starting to do live events around podcasts, like do a podcast live and do
Mm-hmm.
live performances. And the pandemic hit and that kind of messed that up. We started getting other podcasts and kind of being a network for those podcasts. I say kind of because it didn't quite launch. Starting a network is a hard thing. It didn't quite
Mm-hmm.
launch as a network. So it's been through many iterations and experimentation. But right now, I have my podcasts up on there, a Future X podcast, which talks about building positive communities online. And I interviewed a whole slew of people, 15 people or so, about that. And I'm going to do another season, which is going to be about utopian thinking and how to build that. And I'm publishing my own books on there, but eventually hope to publish other books and help other people get their podcasts going to talk about positive visions of the future. That's the idea of it.
Gotcha. Nice. Um, so that's the end of the Q&A section for the podcast, and now I'd like to move into my favorite segment with my guests called First Thoughts. But First Thoughts is brought to you in part by SRA Solutions Inc., simple solutions for complex problems. For over 15 years, SRA Solutions has provided today's solution to prevent tomorrow's problem. SRA Solutions will provide you efficient, effective, robust, and reliable business intelligence, application, website design, and PC support services. For more information, visit their website at www.sresolutions.org. Now, Lee, I'm not sure if you're familiar with First Thoughts, but in case you're not, First Thoughts is my opportunity with my guests to throw a word or a phrase at them and get their first thoughts. For those who are joining or listening or watching for the first time, as I always say, shame on you, but I'm happy you're here. Lee is not privy to the first thoughts because that would obviously ruin the first thoughts. So, Lee, you ready?
Yeah,
All right. First thought, moon colonization. What's your first thought?
definitely happening. Probably military. I
Hmm.
don't see a rosy, shiny reason for moon colonization. I see mining and I see military uses.
Gotcha. Now, we talked about Time Machine. In the movie Time Machine, he's somewhere in the future. He accidentally stops in a location where they're evacuating Earth because they colonized the moon and something went wrong and it messed up the gravity and the moon's crashing into the Earth, so they're evacuating the planet. Hopefully nothing like that happens in our lifetime. But that was my first thought when I actually wrote this first thought down to ask you. I said, I remember seeing this in a movie somewhere where it didn't go too well. But hopefully that doesn't happen to us. Next first thought, writer's block. What's your first thought?
Doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist. Think about it. Do you ever have plumber's block? A plumber comes and says, I'm just not feeling it. I can't unclog that sink. I'm really sorry. I have to leave. I think that writer's block is an invention. If you really don't feel like writing that day, go for a run. Go out. Go get a glass of wine or whatever you do to break the whatever you're stuck on. But I think writing every day. I write 6 days a week. I take one day off. Writing every day. You just do it, even if what you write sucks, which can definitely happen. But you remember from early on when we started this, sometimes I have to write, I can't think of what to write. I can't think of anything to write. I don't know what to write. Or I'll get out a piece of paper and a pencil. I'll break my pattern. I'll go to a different place. I'll go to a coffee shop. And I'll tell myself, this doesn't have to be great, but I'm going to get in my, I set a word quota, 600 words a day. I'm going to get in my 600 words, or I'm just going to write for an hour no matter what. So I don't think writer's block really exists.
What's interesting is I believe this is my either second or third time with this first thought for someone who was an author of some capacity. And I believe every single time everyone said it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And provided justification why. It's interesting. I didn't know where that was going to go, but as soon as you said it, that's why I started smiling. I'm just like, yep, everybody believes the exact same thing.
Right.
Yeah. All right, last first thought, online privacy. What's your first thought?
What interests me about this is there's many people who say, I have nothing to hide. I don't care. I don't need to be private. And my response is, well, if you're a upper middle class white person saying that, well, terrific. I mean, how great. But I think about trans people or people who are political activists or anybody who's doing something that someday there could be the figurative or real knock at the door. That matters. That really matters. And I think that people say online privacy, I don't really care. It matters. It's not the inconvenience of getting a silly ad, for something that you didn't really want because you used Chrome and they tracked you. It's really that you should have the freedom to say and do and activate what you want and not have someone trying to shut you down or mess with your internet connection. And, a lot of people who are in the mainstream may not have experience with that, but ask a political activist or ask a person of color or ask someone who's neurodivergent or non-binary, and you'll get a really different answer, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Honestly, so just to follow up on that, you mentioned Chrome. Was that because Chrome is not your choice of browser when it comes to online privacy, or just because we're using Chrome for this?
Well, I'm actually using Vivaldi for this, which is a Chromium browser. Chrome, for some amazing reason, made Chrome open source. So there's a browser I use called Arc, and there's another one that I'm using right now called Vivaldi, and they work on the Chrome platform, so it won't mess up what we're doing, but there's no tracking. They're not tracking you the way Chrome does. Because we sure get, we'll be looking for vacation spots, and then all these vacation spots ads will come up, or I'm not a youngster anymore, and we'll have all this embarrassing old guy stuff come up in my ads. It's like, don't give me the old guy stuff, So I prefer to use browsers that are not tracking me to whatever extent I can.
Yeah, and a lot of applications, social media, or even just non-social media applications now ask you, I have an iPhone, but they ask you, do you want to track across your applications now? And it's kind of like the terms and conditions or any other thing that people don't read. You don't really think about it. Now, I do allow that for some of the apps, but it's funny when I think about terms and conditions. I saw one the other day for some app was updated. And I usually scroll through because I like to look at different buzzwords. I like to see what's actually in there. But I mean, these things are 20, 30 pages long. I mean, nobody's reading these things. And so a lot of times people are caught off guard when they see their information is allowed to be sold here or given there, or, stripped away the demographic info, but I can give everything else to other companies. And just to follow up, I like to follow up sometimes these questions.
Sure.
How important is it to be informed about whether it's the applications you use, the banks you use, the organizations that you use, and their privacy policy, being really informed on that for the services you use?
I think it's important. I think it's hard because those terms of service are deliberately confusing and will get you crazy and put you into a trance. And I think in some ways that's the point. But there's going to be a line that gets crossed, and that's the issue. That it's not so much that I'm inconvenienced by a silly ad. It's that if there's ever a leak of that information and people can start putting together where I've been, what I'm doing, what I'm buying, and what illnesses I have, say, that's going to be a bit too much information that's about me that's going to be out there for someone to use or abuse. So that sounds pretty abstract and like, that'll never happen. The police do it all the time. Hackers do it all the time. So it's not something that we're all facing every day right now, but it could be a reality if you're not at least trying to be aware.
Gotcha. So that's the end of First Thoughts. But starting this season, I'm turning over power to my guest before we wrap up in a segment I'm calling TO First Thoughts. Now, the brainchild behind this is my TO, who I talked about in the opening segment. Does not stand for turning over, by the way. Who thought of the idea allowing my guest to offer a first thought back to me. So, Lee, what first thought do you have for me?
What's the most difficult podcast question you've had to ask of a guest?
The most difficult podcast question. Actually, what pops into my head, we go back to my first season, and there was it felt like it was a slew of back-to-back encounters with minority men and police, which culminated with the killing of, and I'm blanking on his name for some reason right now. But I did an episode with a former officer who was a training officer, state troopers here in Pennsylvania, where I used to live. And probably the most difficult question I asked him is, how do we change the perception of police? I grew up in a cop home. My mother was a cop. I have friends that are cops now, a cousin who's an active cop right now. He was a cop, a good friend of mine, a fraternity brother. And so asking someone, how do we stop hating you? How do we stop believing that we can't trust you? And we've had this really great conversation so far, but I still don't trust you because I still have a history and stories I can tell where that trust did not end well for me, or people that I've known, or people that I've seen on the news. Probably having that conversation with someone I considered a friend, and saying to them, hey, might be a friend of mine, but in your police capacity, I might not look at you as a friend, was probably the one that pops into my head.
Fascinating. Yeah. I don't really have a follow-up to that. I just agree totally. It's complicated. It can become complicated. Police have, especially with little kids, I have a 11-year-old, they make a big effort to be friendly to the kids and, sort of the giving out candy kind of thing. But I often think about, like, not everybody's going to have that feeling about a police officer, even though they may try.
Yeah. And I feel like you keep doing this today, but for the record, Travis, I do consider you a friend, just to put that out there. All right, Lee. So that's going to wrap us up for the day. I do want to thank you for stepping into Dave's head. But as always, with my guests, before I let you go, I'd like to offer you the opportunity. If there's anything you'd like to promote or talk about, feel free to do so now. Awesome.
Well, I have written a book called Surrender, and the place to find it is at futurex.studio. FutureX.studio has all the links to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to find it. And I have a sequel coming out next year. So hopefully I'll get you hooked on Surrender. And then the next one's called Resist. It's part of a trilogy. So I hope your audience will check that out.
Great. Well, thank you, Lee, once again for stepping in Dave's head. And I think we hopefully have opened some eyes when it comes to online privacy And I hope we gain some sci-fi fans too, because like I said, I'm a big Trek head, or Trekkie. What do we call us? Trekkies. They call us Trekkies. Hopefully we get some more sci-fi watchers and readers of your book. So thank you again.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
My favorite segment in my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. Before I get into my GRIN, I want to take a moment to salute the man I call my second father. He would have been 81 years young today. He passed a little over a year ago, in August, after a courageous and long battle with cancer. I talked about how August is a tough month for me before, but there are dates outside of August that are tough as well. The day I'm recording this, September 5th, is my uncle or second father's birthday. February 20th is my grandmother's birthday. Those are tough times. But I'm happy and proud, as I've said before, to have shared a little bit of the time frame, or timeline, I should say, on this planet with those people, my grandmother and my uncle. So happy birthday, Unc. And may you continue resting peacefully. As you can see, I'm wearing a little Alabama pride here, a little Roll Tide roll, if you can see all the way, if you're on YouTube or Spotify. As college football kicked off this past weekend, Roll Tide getting the dub in convincing fashion, albeit against the Sisters of the Poor. I get it. College teams schedule cupcakes the first 2 weeks. It just happens. We roll with it. This week, we got a big one against Texas, and hopefully next episode, I'm still feeling good about the Tide. The Eagles begin their defense of NFC Championship and hopefully a repeated run back to Super Bowl this weekend as the NFL kicks off. It's arguably outside of March Madness, and listen, I love football, love football. My favorite sport by a huge stretch, but nothing, and I mean nothing, tops that first weekend of March Madness for me. I've said it before. I'll continue to say it. March Madness and then football, generally. You may know, because I might have talked about it on this podcast, that I played football for 30 years, almost consecutively. There's a 5-year gap where I didn't play. I played 2 years in high school, 2 years in college, 6 years semi-pro, and about 20 years of flag, rough touch leagues and flag, rough touch tournaments. So I love me some football. Bleacher Report did an article way back in 2011. I'd be curious to see them reprise this article and reorder these things as I'm about to walk through. But the article is entitled 10 Reasons Why American Football is the Best Sport in the World. Now I'm going to run through their list from 10 to 1. And then I'm going to take that same 10 and reorder it where I think it's at. So bear with me. Number 10, tailgating. There's a huge problem for me with this being so low. But tailgating is self-explanatory. I'm not going to dig into the details unless I need to with some of these things. Number 9, Cinderella stories. Think about March Madness. Whereas in the NFL, you got a team who shouldn't make the playoffs, gets in as a wild card, like the Giants did years ago, made their way all the way to the Super Bowl. Cinderella story. Number 8, the chess match. If you are old school football aficionado, like I am, you might remember the Peyton Manning days, back when he used to go to the line, he'd audible the line, he'd call his own plays. It's a chess match between the defense and Peyton Manning. Or you might get the old Smash Mouth, 2000 Ravens Smash Mouth defense, Eagles 91 defense, where you're trying to figure out how can I score on this team because they're that damn good. That type of chess match, in-game chess match. Oh, they got a slow linebacker. Let me see if we can target him. They can't do anything with our defensive line, so let's just go straight forward and sit back in coverage. That type of stuff. The chess matches. That's number 8 for them. Number 7, the rivalries. Think about it. Eagles, that team from Texas. You got Saints Falcons. You got Steelers Ravens. All these great rivalries. 49ers Cardinals. Is that a rivalry? I don't know. Who knows? Number 6, defensive excitement. Now, it's very generic, right? But the way I explain this is, think about this. In basketball, a defensive play can lead to points, but not necessarily. You can steal the ball, go to the other end, miss the layup, steal the ball, go down, miss a three-pointer. But in NFL, you can intercept the pass, and that lead directly to points. You could block a field goal, that lead directly to points. You can get a safety and score points. Right? Number 5, weekly intrigue. I get it. You know, you got some compelling matchups this weekend, right? You got to think about this, when Brett Favre went back to play the Green Bay Packers as a Viking, or when Reggie White played the Eagles as a Packer. Yeah. Should have never left Philly. This year you've got, a couple matchups with guys going to their old teams or playing their old teams. That type of stuff. Number 4, fantasy football. Biggest thing in football these days. $1 billion industry. Huge. It makes football interesting. I just did my draft on Sunday, a couple days ago. Number 3, Thanksgiving traditions. Think about, and this is not massages in any type of way, but think about, you got the ladies in the kitchen, you got the men around the TV watching, everybody comes together for dinner, then guys go back to where they were watching the games, or going to the man cave and all this stuff. Having scotches and drinks and laughing and joking around football on Thanksgiving. Number 2, they have parity. If you don't know what parity is, it means that if you have a team that sucked this year, that might be good next year. You have a team that was good this year, that might suck next year. And you have teams that are sort of good, now they're sort of bad, or sort of bad, now they're sort of good. Parity is just changing every season. You never know. And number 1 they have is the Super Bowl. One of the, if not the largest events in the world annually. So, their order from least important reason to most important reason, 10 to 1. Tailgating, Cinderella stories, the chess match, rivalries, defensive excitement, weekly intrigue, fantasy football, Thanksgiving traditions, parody, and then the Super Bowl. That's their 10. Here's my 10. Number 10 is parody. Why did parody drop from number 2 for them to number 10 for me? I don't care if teams go from bad to good. I kind of like the superstars of the league being on the good teams. I kind of like the teams I don't really care about sucking. I don't want to see them in the playoffs. I kind of like almost every year I can count on a team from Dallas to choke when it matters. I kind of like that. Parody, not the most important to me. So them number 2, me number 10. Number 9, Thanksgiving traditions. So I know I gave the example, and that's their number 3. This is my number 9. I know I gave the example around Thanksgiving dinner, watching the games, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Great time to be had. The other side of Thanksgiving traditions is you see the Detroit Lions and you see that team from Texas play every damn Thanksgiving. I don't want to see that. I don't care about that. I don't want to see the same teams, especially when the Lions were just sucking. I don't want to see them get beat every Thanksgiving, and I don't want to see that team from Texas on TV every Thanksgiving. So that's why Thanksgiving traditions is number 9 for me, number 3 for them. Number 8, fantasy football. Number 4 for them, number 8 for me. Granted, I enjoy fantasy football. For the longest time, I did not do it, but I enjoy it. Did my draft the other night. Won a championship 2 years ago. Lost it last year. Plan to get it back this year. Got a big oversized ring to prove it. But for me, I like watching the game. I like diagnosing the game. A former player, it's just in me. I like to enjoy the game. I crank the volume up during football season. I'm sure my neighbors from my old house and this current house can tell you that. But fantasy football at times takes away from the game. You're looking at scores. Oh, where am I? Am I winning? Blah, blah, blah. No. And that's partly on me. Maybe I should only check this between games or wait till the games are done, because I can't change anything anyway. Unless there's somebody who hasn't played yet. And see, that's what I'm talking about. Too much thinking about the football game, not enough watching the football game. And so, take a sip here. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, I got my Eagles mug out already. So fantasy football, great for the league. Great, brings in participation from a whole flock of people who may not be watching, but see an opportunity to win a league, maybe for money, etc. Number 7, Cinderella stories. For me, number 7. For them, number 9. Why are Cinderella stories more important to me than it is to Bleacher Report? I like the story. Let's go back to March Madness, my most exciting time of the year. It literally is about Cinderella stories that drive March Madness. Yeah, it's about the Dukes and North Carolinas and Syracuse if you're a fan of them like I am, and all the teams, the Kansases, the Gonzagas, and all those teams. But it's the the small school in Chicago or the little school from Texas or one from Florida, all those different schools who 15 beating a two or you know 10 beating a seven, all these different scenarios, right? Where you got the guy, the little school going all the way to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight that shouldn't be there. Well, same thing with the NFL. You get, like I said, the wild card team that sneaks into the playoffs, beats up a couple teams, make it to the AFC or NFC Championship, and they might lose, but it's a Cinderella story. It's a great story. Remember the Jaguars from a couple years ago? Cinderella team. Had a great opportunity to beat Tom Brady. Couldn't do it. Number 6, weekly intrigue. For them, number 5. So we're kind of in agreement here. Kind of middle of the pack in the importance to why American football is the best sport in the world. Weekly intrigue to me is matchups. Every single week in the NFL, you got a story. Whether it's a team that's starting slow and they're underachieving. Whether it's a team that came out of nowhere and they're 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. Whether it's a budding superstar coming out of nowhere. Whether it's two guys playing each other at quarterback who open their mouth and start talking. Whether it's two coaches playing each other. Whatever the story. Whether it's somebody got raped or sexual assault or crashed a car or got injured. And now you got some rookie starting who wasn't supposed to see the field for 2 years. Every week, the NFL has some intriguing stories. Number 5 for me is a chess match. Number 8 for them is a chess match. Now, this could be attributed to the fact that I enjoy the game. If you've ever watched football with me, and there's a handful or more people that can tell you, I'm sitting there calling out the play before it's snapped. I'm sitting there calling different defensive alignments. I'm sitting there calling to watch this tendency. Here's second in this. Watch for this play. That's just when I'm fully engaged, that's what I do. And so the chess match for me is a huge part of the game. More important because I'm a 5, they're 8. Next one, number 4, defensive excitement. There's 6, I'm a 4, so we're kind of agreement here. Now, I played offense, I punted, I punt return, kick return, held for field goals, all these different things I did. My most enjoyable side of the ball is defense. And so defensive excitement for me is the 2000 Ravens, the 91 Eagles, the Brian Dawkins of the world, the Ed Reeds of the world, the Troy Polamalu's of the world. Watching those guys play. Watching, Revis Island, Sauce Gardner. Watching all these guys now, these catching Sauce, by the way, great name. But all these guys play now, defensive specialists. Number 3 for me is rivalries. Rivalries are number 7 for them. I don't understand why rivalries wouldn't be higher for. I mean, that's what sports is all about, the rivalries. Duke UNC. Eagles, that team from Texas. Georgia, Alabama. Alabama, Auburn. Like, think about rivalries in sports, whatever sport it is. Phillies, Mets. Right? Phillies, Braves. But Phillies, Mets. Yankees, Sox. Like, think rivalries just drives the passion of sports. Drives the passion of the fans. And for me, it's the third most important reason why NFL and football is the greatest or best sport in the world. For them, rivalry is number 7. We don't agree there. So it only leaves 2. Number 2 for me is tailgating. Number 10 for them is tailgating. And I said from the beginning, I don't understand why tailgating is so low. It literally is the pulse, the heartbeat of the fandom. I talked about where I used to travel around the country for college football, NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, and get fans' reactions. Walk through tailgates, do interviews. I used to do this. And there's nothing, I tell you, nothing like walking through an NFL tailgate. Like if you get a chance this year, even if you have a setup, say you got a 4:00 game or a night game, you get there mad early because you know how we do. Say, I'm going to the porta potty and just walk around the parking lot. Just walk around the different environment. People offering you food, drinks, celebrating, doing chants. The tailgate experience is what's absolutely one of the most important reasons or most enjoyable things for fans of sports, especially football. And definitely makes it my top 2 as to why NFL is one of the greatest sports in the world. or American football? Number one is Super Bowl. Think about Thanksgiving. We talked about Thanksgiving. And for them, it was number 3. For me, it was number 9. But the Super Bowl is number 1 for both of us. If you take that same concept of Thanksgiving, you get so many people together. Food, drinks, games, all types of things coming together for one event one night. I hosted a Super Bowl party last year. Didn't work out the way I was hoping for, but I hosted it. We had a great time. Good food, great people. Got a little tipsy. I did. And very sad. But the Super Bowl, there used to be a commentator for college talk about the Rose Bowl, called it the granddaddy of them all. Well, the Super Bowl is kind of like the granddaddy of them all. Keith Jackson, by the way, is his name. But to go down my list, number 10, parody. 9, Thanksgiving traditions. 8, fantasy football. 7, Cinderella stories. 6, weekly intrigue. 5, the chess match. 4, defensive excitement. 3, rivalries. 2, tailgating. And 1, the Super Bowl. That's my order of the top 10 reasons why American football is the best sport in the world. I'm excited to see my Eagles kick off their season this coming weekend. Ready to get this thing moving down the road again. Let's get back to the Super Bowl, do what we do. And Bama, let's go knock some Longhorns around the head. Let's go kick some ass. How about that? I do want to thank Lee Schneider for stepping into Dave's head and really offering some interesting dialogue around this sci-fi world. And really, this might be a sign. This is like the third guest I've had on where we had conversations about authoring books. And I've gotten more than enough tips to get this book started, including just getting up every day and taking a pad and writing whatever is in my mind, which is kind of like doing a show every day. Check out his website at futurex.studio. Find him on Instagram at DocUGuy or at futurex.studio. Support our sponsors, Digamovers at www.digamovers.com for all your local and long distance needs. And SRE Solutions Inc. at www.sresolutions.org for all your PC repair, website design, network installations, and so much more. And if you're interested in sponsoring on Dave's Head, reach out to me on any of my social media and we can make it happen. So transitions, sci-fi, and the pigskin. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. New episodes released on the 2nd and 4th Friday of the month. For all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Subscribe to watch new episodes on YouTube or Spotify video, or to listen via your preferred podcast player, go to anchor.fm/Dave's Head Pod. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, enjoy life, because life should be fun. Take care.